I'm Demetria Kaladimos, and I'd like to welcome you to a talkback, a question and answer session after the premiere screening of The Bowl. You saw some of these folks in the film. Blake Neyland, grandson of the great general. Ben Berry is next to us, next to Blake. He was the interviewer on most of these long interviews, and that meant doing a lot of research and a lot of preparation before our shoots. Dr. Tim Johnson, who literally wrote the book about the man, and that book, by the way, is coming out this summer, July 28th?
July 9th, actually.
July 9th, okay, great. Our timing was good.
Yeah, perfect time.
And then my longtime colleague, Rudy Kalis, who has forgotten more about the Vols than most of us know. Tim, years of scholarship went into this book. How long? When did you start? How did you start?
Well, this is my 9th book, but this one I did in record time, a little less than 4 years. And I'm grateful to Lipscomb University for giving me some release time to help me fast track this, because when I began this in 2022, I really wanted for it to be out by 2026. That was the target, obviously, because of the 100th anniversary. And so I had written military history in the past, but never a 20th century topic, never a sports-related topic. So there was a pretty steep learning curve, but it was a wonderful project. And I was happy that we were able to sort of team up as you guys were working on the documentary. The Neyland family was very, very helpful in providing materials, some manuscripts, letters, documents, pictures that no one had ever looked at before. And so that's a real dream for a historian to get that kind of opportunity.
And you mentioned in the film that the idea of putting together, the engineer who would build football teams, that kind of came from another scholar at a conference?
Yeah, this was a long time ago at this history conference where you go and you sit and listen to boring papers, that historians read as they, sit at a podium in front of a group of folks. But this one paper it just caught my interest, the crossover terminology between football and military, and I'm thinking, of course, line of scrimmage, offense and defense, throwing the bomb, an aerial attack, and so that kind of resonated. And then Neyland, I'm not a UT grad, and so.
Yeah, tell us where you went to school.
Oops, I shouldn't have mentioned that. I went to school at the University of Alabama, and the first time that Blake and I met, and we met on campus when he came to do the interview when Ben interviewed him, and we went into my office where my diplomas are hanging, and I thought Blake was going to have a heart attack when he actually saw where my diplomas were from. But it was a great topic. I thought for a long time this is probably a topic worth exploring, and it was.
Rudy, you remember the first time you went into Neyland Stadium, and what did you think?
I thought it was like a gladiator's pit inside the Coliseum. You look up, because I always went down on the field. I always got a field pass to be able to be with a photographer. Then looked up, and 100,000 people. And the beauty of it is that from what he was with his engineering such background, he built the plans to build it up. So the original structure is still there, and everything they have built has been around that. And he knew I-40 was coming, the Vol Radio Network. He said, we've got to build this thing bigger. He was so brilliant in all that he thought about. I was just fascinated by the different sides of the man. Because on one side, he's like, I remember Vince Lombardi. They ran the end sweep every single time. Everybody knew it was coming. You couldn't stop it. Same thing with him, military discipline. You will do exactly what you do. There's no other sport where you take 11 men who have to perfectly sync together to make it hit just right, and he could do it. And I love what you said, Blake. He was the right man at the right time. Because of the war influence and things going on, he could make those players, and all come together. Couldn't coach that way now. At that time, you could say, boys, run through the wall. And they go, yes, sir, you heard them all. You tell it to them now, they say, why? It's a difference. You've got to be a psychologist. That's what Nick Saban got out of coaching, and Mike Krzyzewski out of coaching. It's not the same anymore. He was the right man at the right time. And then on the other side, he's so innovative. He does all these sideline things and the tearaway jerseys. I remember Earl Campbell running with him, tearing them off the back of him. All the things that he did. And then he loved Westerns, and he'd went to Hollywood and Lana Turner, and he was that. I'm not doing any interviews. People who listen to interviews don't know what they're talking about. So he was all these beautiful things that came together in the right person at the right time, as you said.
Blake, to you, he was grandpa.
Well, he died when I was 2 years old, and we called him Papa. I remember.
He had a Hemingway kind of look, didn't he?
I know he liked Hemingway, but but for public consumption, if I said Papa, well, who are you talking about? So my brother and I, we just call him the General.
Yeah, but you talked about his softer side, and those are the sort of stories that go around the family, not necessarily about the win-loss record, but about what he did for his family.
Yeah. He was, and I think one of the great things that I noticed about his coaching and some of the greatest achievements and some of the greatest stories I heard were times when he was able to take the pressure off the players. And, because today you see these coaches just ranting and raving on the sidelines, and he was always very stoic, calm. And one time they asked him after a game that came down to the final seconds, they said, you were just sitting on the edge of the bench, not doing anything. He said, well, I had meticulously prepared my men for any contingency. They were ready, and they won.
Was there a game, what was the bowl game was it against Texas? Was it Cotton Bowl or something? Where they were in the locker room, they were all tight before the bowl game, and outside they can hear the band warming up to play, and they're playing the Tennessee Waltz. He says, open up the windows, and he starts sashaying around the room before the game. And then they all just settled down, and now the game talk, and went out and won. So he was fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great story, and that's one of the episodes that I think about or hear about the most. And he was a trained ballroom dancer from West Point. And his wife was kind of high society, and so he had to learn how to dance. He was a good professional dancer, or not professional, but just he knew what he was doing on the dance floor. And he so he did the little waltz around the locker room, and the players just busted out laughing, and they loosened up and went on to win that game 20-14.
There you go.
This was, I think it was the 1951 Cotton Bowl now.
Right.
Bill Harr probably can verify that. He sensed that the players were really tight and nervous. And so when they heard the music playing, he cupped his hand around his ear. And then he just started, like you say, dancing with an imaginary partner. He was a great dancer. Always had been. When he was in his late 50s, he won an Arthur Murray dance contest at the Cherokee Country Club in Knoxville.
Wow.
So he danced his whole life and was apparently very good at it. One woman early in life referred to him as terpsichore. I had to look up that word first to find out how to pronounce it.
It's Greek.
And
There you go.
And then to find out what it meant. Well, in In Greek mythology, Terpsichore is the goddess of dance, and this lady had referred to him that way.
Ben Berry, congratulations on finishing this project. I've got to say that, you know, when you start something like this, hands up everyone that wants to work on a documentary, and, you know, 10, 12 students show up for day one, and by day 101, it's Ben and I in the middle of the night editing. What out of this experience did you take with you into the working world? Because now you're a graduate.
That's a great question. You build a lot of great communication skills through a project like this, and also problem solving. I mean, there was a lot of times where you're walking into an interview, we didn't even know the location that it was going to be at. So you had to be very adaptable. But I'd say something that was just extremely memorable was, those late nights interviewing editing and preparing for these interviews. All things persevering through a project, like you said, that's something that will take me a long way, I think, in my career.
Yeah, and being face to face with greats like Philip Fulmer and Mr. Haslam, who has built an empire. I mean, it's not every day that you can sit down across from someone like that and talk to them about some of their greatest times in life.
Yeah, no question. And a lot of those interviews, I was able to get wisdom from. Like, I mean, I always think about those maxims, and Haslam was talking about how he carried those maxims with him into the business world. One of my favorite quotes from this whole project was when he was talking about risk taking and how the maxim is specifically the team that makes the fewest mistakes will win, not the team that makes no mistakes will win. Because if you're not making mistakes, you're not taking risks. And a guy who is worth, I don't know, $15 billion, I mean, that's some credibility there, that wisdom. So I thought a lot of these interviews, and with Blake and Tim and all the interviews I did, I always left feeling like I had a bit of wisdom to take with me, outside of just the skills of interviewing and asking questions and all of that you and I worked on very closely.
Rudy, any surprises that so few of these students who are wearing the colors and showing up to the games have any clue about the man?
No, not surprised. It's kind of a shame, you know, don't realize the background of that sort of thing. But that's kind of society nowadays, that people are just into themselves. I was just so fascinated by it. I enjoyed always kind of studying about him. Where did the name come from when I first came here in the 70s? He was superstitious too, wasn't he? From what I heard, he wore like the same suit all the time.
Same gray suit.
Same gray suit, you know? It's like Pete Maravich with the floppy socks, that sort of thing. And he always sat down on the sidelines because, like you said, I work all week, they're all ready to go, let's go. And then he would find the strongest thing. If we whip the strongest guy on their side, we break their morale, we go after him. This military stuff. And then there's that other side that I just love. It's in the family. Are there traits that you think you've inherited from him, Blake?
Well, thanks for asking me the question. But he had a very fun side. And I'll give you an example. When my father, who was very rigid and straight-laced, okay, everything was black and white, and it was, we do right and so forth. I remember as a young man, he thought the Beatles were evil. Okay, my father did. He thought, now Elvis was the devil himself. Okay, so that was just his take, my father's take on the world. Well, so the general thought that was funny. So he would go around the house singing, "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog," which was one of Elvis's biggest songs, and he just loved to kind of poke fun. And he, during that time, a big Johnny Weissmuller was big, Tarzan was big, and he would do these big, loud, the Tarzan call, and all the grandchildren would just scatter, it was just loud and boisterous. So, he just had a very fun human side to him as well. Obviously, they called him the Bull for a reason. Jim Haslam said, if he walked into the room today, I'd be afraid of him, you know. And so there was a more gentler, fun side to him.
Yeah, but you had this larger than life, West Point, and a general, for God's sake, and just, an icon in football. There had to be tremendous pressure. Or do you think he allowed everyone to be the individual that they were?
Well, yes. I think that, although I'll tell you this, my father didn't want to play football. He wanted to just be a student. And the general said, well, you can't go to the University of Tennessee unless you play. You're going to play football if you go to the University of Tennessee. And my father wanted to go to the University of Tennessee, so he played football. So, there was a little bit of compulsion there. But that's kind of, that's an example, I think, of him exerting some pressure. But like I said, there were times when he was an expert at taking the pressure off. In that Texas game, they were behind 14-7, and they scored a touchdown. It's 14-13. They line up to kick, and their kicker's name is Pat. It was a gentleman named Pat Shires from Knoxville. And I met Mr. Shires, and just a wonderful man, kind of quiet, kind of shy. And he missed the extra point. So they're down 14-13. And Pat Shires walks to the sidelines, and he's hanging his head, and my grandfather walked out there, put his hand on his shoulders and said, that's okay, son, we didn't come here to tie. And, he loosened him up and they went on to score another touchdown and kick the extra point and won 20-14.
All right.
So good.
And that game, I spend a little bit of time dealing with that game in the book because Neyland, I think, was at his best. He told his players before the game how everything would unfold, and then at halftime, when Tennessee was behind, he told them exactly what would happen in the second half. And here's what's going to happen, and they're going to get tired, and they're going to throw we'll intercept the ball, and then we'll come. And that's exactly what happened during the game. And if you're a 20, 21-year-old young player, and I've seen this in researching about other time periods and other wars. If the general writes some orders and tells you, here's what we're going to do tomorrow in this battle, and here's how it will unfold, and it unfolds precisely that way, that young lieutenant is just in awe that the commander had such foresight to be able to anticipate exactly what would happen. And that's what that Texas game was. And there were other examples of that too, where General Neyland would sort of say, he would explain, now here's what you can expect and here's what's going to happen, and it would unfold just that way. And these young men were just awestruck.
Rudy, did it surprise you that some of these present day coaches were very, very aware of Neyland's strategies?
Yeah. Dude Rockney called him the greatest ever. Bear Bryant, he never lost to Bear Bryant. So these kinds of people. I love what you said. I'm fascinated by people, only a few, that in the late 40s, he had 500 kind of seasons. People say, you're getting too old, you can't do it anymore. I'm not. I'm fascinated by people who have the confidence to stay the course. That's exactly where I'm going to stay, and that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to win. And the other part of what you said, Tim, for me, I've thought a great deal. Again, his era, World War II. There are times when I say to myself, the young men that went on the beach at Normandy had no idea what they were going into. They had not seen videos. They had not seen war films. They were 18, 19, 20, but they had a general, or Eisenhower himself came, or a lieutenant said, we're going. And then they got caught in this war and kept on going because there was nowhere else to go. And that's what he did on the football field with them. So there's this, he was a perfect man at the perfect time.
General Neyland had an uncanny ability to take what he knew about the military discipline and that sort of thing and incorporate that into the football field. Blake mentioned that in the documentary. But he also was very good at using what he knew about players and sports and using that to, when he was commanding troops, to keep morale high and things like that. He crossed over. It's amazing to me how he so seamlessly could go back and forth between football and the Army and back to football and then back to the Army, and just, it was seamless, and he excelled at both. It was not that he was really good at one thing, but he just wasn't very good at he was good at both of them.
Yeah.
You know, I love the book, and I really appreciate getting a chance to read it, and just to see how he excelled in World War II and unloading those ships. And he talks a lot about his military career, which was fascinating to me because I didn't know as much about that. But he said, we get it done on time. And he had the fastest, I think the fastest
Discharge rate.
Discharge rate,
Yeah.
yes, in the entire Army, in his port in Calcutta. And he had three facets that everybody had to excel at. They had to excel in technique, they had physical conditioning, and morale. Now, you know, where do you think that's a total crossover.
Yeah. Ben, is there a particular moment during our Odyssey that stands out in your mind, besides stopping at Buc-ee's?
That was great. We stopped at Buc-ee's and people were stopping Demetria because they recognized her. They're like, "Who is this celebrity coming in Buc-ee's?" But yeah, I would say definitely the interviews with Bud and with Phil Fulmer at the Tennessee Football Complex. Those were very memorable, just because those guys were so impressive, and obviously Philip Fulmer let me wear his championship ring. I thought that was pretty cool.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, we took a picture together. But I would also say filming at UT Stadium. A lot of that B-roll, that was really neat to see all put together, Demetria. Really, really neat to see the final cut. But a lot of that was stuff that me and Anastasia, who unfortunately couldn't be here, filmed. But we were on the sideline at Neyland, and then we went up to the press box and were filming that whole time. Really like face-to-face with these players and getting that atmosphere of Neyland Stadium. That was really, really impressive. So I'd say the interview portion and the filming on the sideline were memorable.
Yeah, it is pretty fun to be on the field, isn't it, Rudy?
I was never in the press box. They always wondered where I was because I wanted to feel it. I got kicked out of a huddle by Johnny Majors. They had called a timeout, and they can go down to the 30-yard line, and he turned, and I kind of eased over there, and finally he says, "Kalis, get the blank out of here." That's why I got in this stuff. I just love athletics and sports and people that can produce a coach that says, "You're going to do this, and you're going to win." And he was there.
You know, non-television people may not know this, but shooting sports is an art all in its own, is it not?
It is, and I worked with John Wilson for 30 years. He could get into the football like you'd have seen in NFL films. He was the one exactly where to stand when the Music City Miracle were the Titans. I was going to go by the locker and said, no, I got a feeling. Let's go right here. Came right at us. And we were there when Peerless Price wins the national championship game in '98. We're right in that corner. He's got it in the frame right at us. John just turned to me and smiled. "I got it, baby."
Yeah.
There's a difference between a shooter and a photographer, right, Zena? Some people can just point a camera, but other people can feel it and then can hear a reaction and turn and get just the right person giving the right reaction. You did it beautifully. Your documentary is beautiful.
Tim, what are your plans for the book?
Sell a lot of copies. Shameless plug. I asked my editor, I emailed her a couple of weeks ago, and I said, the book's not out yet, I know. Can you send me at least one copy so I'll have it on May the 27th? So I have one copy. There it is. I do want to say that, and Blake wrote the foreword. for the book. Did a great job, and I've stolen this line from him. I've mentioned this on other occasions, but Blake wrote this in the foreword, and I'll sort of paraphrase. He always had thought of the general as a football coach who also happened to be an officer in the Army. But he said after reading this, he kind of changed his views a little bit to think of Neyland as an Army officer who also happened to be a coach. Neyland always saw himself first as an Army officer. And you mentioned Calcutta, and we don't have time to get into it here, but what he accomplished at Calcutta, which was a major supply hub in the Southwest Pacific, is phenomenal. He turned around an underperforming military base and made it the most prolific military base in the world in 1945, in the spring of 45. And so, well, you asked me what are my plans. You know, there'll be book signings. I'll do at least 2 in Knoxville. I'm going to Atlanta, and Blake and I will talk about the general and do a book signing there. So, hey, I'm happy to come to any of your book signing events.
Right, spread the word. And Blake, how does it feel to have those very personal items back, the 2 beautiful dress jackets of the generals?
Well, that's wonderful. And I'll tell you, I really want to say this. I want to say thanks to Lipscomb University, to Professor Kaladimos, to Ben's the man, and Tim just for the book. And it's just been a blessing. And I think my excitement is to see maybe people will understand a little bit more about the man, because you do see in it. The first time I saw the documentary, I was kind of like, wow, people do not have a real appreciation of who he was, and I'm really appreciative for you all giving us this kind of light, shedding this kind of light on the man.
I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the life of the general and all the people that learned under him. And those lessons continue to be learned, it's obvious, on campus. And students get to know the man.
I think the university, if they're smart, and I'm sure they will, this will be a year, because of the beauty of your book and the documentary that you've done, that they will do something on that field. And who told me they might even they'll have a game where they may have uniforms, and people will learn who that is. We need to just embrace the background of that stadium and that man, and you've done it beautifully.
Thank you. Can I mention one more thing about the way you ended the documentary with the long speech? Just so you will appreciate what you heard, General Neyland never gave interviews. He didn't like to be, he wouldn't talk into a microphone.
He didn't like public speaking.
No.
Yeah, that was a no.
And he just never did it.
Yeah.
And so you can't find audio of him speaking. We had no idea what was going to be on this reel-to-reel tape. What you heard was the entirety, 4 minutes and 20 seconds of his 1953 retirement speech that he gave several months after he stepped away from coaching. You heard Neyland's voice. Most people, almost everyone who is a UT fan, has never heard Neyland's voice. That's cool.
It sure is. Thank you, Rudy Kalis, Dr. Tim Johnson, Ben Berry, Blake Neyland, and thank you to NECAT for sponsoring our screening tonight. Really appreciate it.